Fly along on eagle's wings as I tell you America's story. Hello, I'm Upton S. Eagle, but you can call me U.S. Eagle for short. We American eagles are the national birds of the United States. This America's story is about George Washington. Welcome to the Capitol, Washington, D.C. Here is where I have my United States Hall of History. There are wonderful tales I can tell of the adventures, heroes, and events of our great nation. They're all organized and stored in my friend here, the Brain-O-Matic computer.
Number one, number one, number one.
Why number one, Brainy?
Because today we are telling the story of George Washington, and he is number one.
That's true. He was the first president of our country. The first and only president to have a state named after him.
Washington State.
And lots more things are named after him, too.
Washington, D.C., Washington Redskins, Washington Bridge, Washington Irving, Washington Carver, Washington...
Hold on, Brainy. You're getting ahead of yourself.
Sorry.
Let's dim the lights and start slowly.
One moment, please.
George Washington. Here he is, the first president of our country.
Number one.
He was also the first general of our army, America's first hero.
Number one.
And he is on our $1 bill.
Right.
There is a well-known saying about George Washington. First in war, first in peace, and first in the hearts of his countrymen.
I just love that saying.
Washington was born before there was a United States. Let's go to our video globe.
One moment, please.
Brainy, show us the map of the United States of America.
One moment, please.
Here we are today, 50 states. Let's go back to Washington's birthday.
February 22nd, 1732.
1732.
There were no 50 states back then, only 13 colonies, and they belonged to England.
The colony of Virginia.
One of the largest colonies, Virginia, was where George Washington was born. We know that George Washington was born into a wealthy farming family. There are lots of legends about our first president's boyhood. The most famous is the cherry tree story. It goes like this. One day, George's father was walking through his cherry orchards. Suddenly, he came upon a cherry tree that had been chopped down. He was very angry. "Who did this?" he demanded. His son, George, stepped forward and replied, "I cannot tell a lie, Father. I did it with my little hatchet." And because George was so honest, his father didn't punish him.
Good thing George didn't have a bulldozer.
That story is a legend. We don't know how true it is. People tell it to show how brave and honest George Washington was. What we do know about Washington is that he learned to ride a horse at an early age. Every boy needed to know how to ride a horse in those days. When George was 11, his father died. His older brother, Lawrence, spent a lot of time with George and became like a father to him. Lawrence encouraged George to become a surveyor.
Surveyors measure land.
George went into the fields and woods and measured the land. He then drew maps, like these, for farmers and other property owners. When people argued about who owned land, maps settle those arguments. Even countries can argue about who owns land, like England and France did over the frontier land west of the colonies. George Washington, because he knew the land so well, became a frontier soldier for the English army. He quickly learned what war was like. He rode a raft down icy rivers and was shot at many times.
Duck, George.
Along the way, he became friends with Indians who taught him how to fight and survive in the wilderness. After England won the war, George Washington returned home. He was now a grown man.
Mount Vernon.
His brother Lawrence had died, so George became the owner of his plantation called Mount Vernon.
A plantation is a large farm.
Yes, thank you, Brainy. He married a wealthy widow, Martha, who came to live with him at Mount Vernon with her 2 children. Washington was now a plantation farmer with a family.
He worked hard every day.
It was a big job running a plantation, and Washington liked his work.
The British are coming. The British are coming.
Ah, the call of the American Revolution.
Also, taxes, taxes, taxes.
England made the colonies pay a lot of taxes. One tax was on tea. The colonists were so angry that one winter night, they threw the tea into the ocean before anyone could buy it.
Brrr, they made iced tea.
Most colonists, including George Washington, agreed that the taxes were unfair.
Unfair.
They met in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to talk about their problems with England. It was the first time the men who would later make the colonies into one country all met together.
Washington was there in his uniform.
They decided to fight for their independence from England. They wanted to be free. On July 4th, 1776, the colonists told the whole world, and especially England, that they were now free. They did it with the Declaration of Independence. But they needed someone to lead their fight, someone who could lead an army.
I know. General George Washington, first in war.
Yes, I know you know, Brainy, but our audience may not know. Washington was a good soldier, someone you could trust.
And he was loyal to America.
They elected him the first commander-in-chief of the First American Army. Washington was a good leader. He started with men who were farmers and shopkeepers. He had to train them to be soldiers and lead them into battle. Washington kept them from giving up when they suffered through a terrible winter at a place called Valley Forge. After 6 years of war, the English were forced to surrender.
At Yorktown, the colonies had now won their freedom, right, Chief?
That's right, Brainy. They were 13 independent states, the United States of America.
Washington had done a good job.
Some people wanted to make him the new king of America. But Washington didn't want to be king or even general any longer. He said goodbye to his army and returned to Mount Vernon to become a farmer again.
Tick-tock, tick-tock.
Time passed. Washington was asked to help the United States of America again. The laws of the United States government were not working very well. Representatives for the 13 independent states met once more in Philadelphia to form a new government for the United States.
They met in Independence Hall.
Washington was asked to lead the meeting. New laws were written, laws that all the states would obey. These laws are called the Constitution. Washington believed in these laws and was the first to sign the Constitution.
He was first in peace.
The Constitution created the office of President. The first man elected to serve as President of the United States was...
I know. President George Washington, #1.
Right, Brainy. Washington's job was to make the new United States government work. He was very careful to follow the laws of the Constitution. He kept the new nation at peace and helped to make it a country where people's rights were protected.
So they could have a good life.
He traveled by carriage to all of the states to hear their problems. Americans turned out to cheer him.
George Washington, he was first in their hearts.
After 8 years as president, he felt it was time for him to become an ordinary citizen again. When he said goodbye as president, He told the citizens of the United States to honor the laws written in the Constitution.
He told them to get good educations.
He returned to farming at his plantation, Mount Vernon. 2 years later, Washington became ill and died. During his lifetime, Washington owned slaves who helped run Mount Vernon. On his death, he left an order that made sure all his slaves were freed.
Washington, D.C.
The city that he helped to plan was ready to become the nation's capital.
The Washington Monument
Stands in Washington, D.C. in honor of Washington's leadership. We honor George Washington because he put service to his country ahead of his own interests, and because he was our first president.
First in war, first in peace, and first in the hearts of his countrymen.
We call him the father of our country. I'm U.S. Eagle, and George Washington is one of the many great heroes in America's story.